James and I crossed paths back in high school. He was the living, breathing embodiment of everything my parents warned me to stay away from. Skipping class, picking fights, basically a walking, talking catalogue of school rule violations. Me. I was the polar opposite. My life's motto was 8 words long: hit the books, aim high, repeat daily. So, you can imagine my surprise when fate decided my life needed a little spice and tossed James into the mix. There I was, minding my own business, when I stumbled upon James getting roughed up by a group of bullies. Couldn't just stand by and watch, so I stepped in to lend a hand. Little did I know, that act of kindness would land me in a heap of trouble. Next thing I knew, James was spreading rumors that I had a major crush on him. Suddenly, he was popping up everywhere I turned. Fed up with his antics, I decided enough was enough and spilled the beans to our homeroom teacher. James got a proper scolding and his folks were summoned for a serious talk. But just when I thought the drama was over, life threw another curveball. It was the last gym class of our sophomore year, and the heat of summer was starting to creep in. Feeling under the weather, I barely made it through the warm-up before collapsing on the track. As I faded in and out of consciousness, I glimpsed a swarm of shoes crowding around me. One pair stood out, clean, laces tied in a way I'd never seen before. Before I could ponder the mystery, I blacked out. Turns out, it was James who swooped in to save the day. He and his buddy happened to be passing by when they saw me take a nosedive. James dashed over in a flash, scooping me up and rushing me to the infirmary. Sure, the story might have been embellished a bit when it made the rounds, thanks to our friendly neighborhood gossip, but I'll admit, James does have a face that's not too hard on the eyes. Even someone as stereotypical and dull as me isn't immune to the James effect. The more I hang out with him, the more I realize he's anything but ordinary. James is vibrant, full of life, and lives in a way I've never seen before. And those rumors about him? Turns out, they're not the whole story. Sure, he skips class, but it's not to goof off, it's to hustle at an internet cafe, earning extra cash to help his grandma with medical bills. As for the fights, well, according to James, it's all about letting off steam. And weirdly enough, I believe him. Because with James, there's always a reason behind his actions. Me. I'm the complete opposite. If James is a wild thorn, I'm the meticulously cultivated flower, following a set path laid out by some invisible gardener. To me, growth is predictable. Flowers don't just sprout extra petals out of nowhere or change colors overnight. But James, he's different. He's a wildflower, thriving in chaos. He can be a thorn, a flower, or something in between, and he's okay with that. Then one day, out of the blue, James drops this bombshell on me. Ever seen how a purple trumpet flower changes color in different liquids? He asks, as we stand in his backyard, surrounded by his experiments. He plucks a fresh flower and demonstrates, dipping it into soap water and then vinegar. The color morphs before my eyes. As for the number of petals, piece of cake. With a swift motion, he plucks them away, leaving a bare stem. See?
No extra petals.
I'm speechless. No one decides what you become but you, James says softly, tucking the flower behind my ear. His words are as soothing as his gaze. If you want to be purple, be purple. If you want to be blue, be blue. His words should have been empowering, but my mind's gone blank. My ear tingles where he touched it, sending shivers down my spine. I can't meet his gaze. Before I know it, I've done something completely out of character. I've kissed James. He seems as surprised as I am, his eyes widening in shock. It wasn't exactly a full-on kiss, more like a clumsy peck on the corner of his mouth. The awkwardness lingers as James sits back, unable to support both our weight, and I bolt before he can react. I kept my distance from James for a few days, but no matter how hard I tried, he always found a way to corner me, whether it was through texts or just our close proximity in the school building. On Friday, it was our group's turn for cleanup duty. I usually got off easy, tasked with simple chores like wiping the blackboard and straightening up the podium before locking up. As I stepped out of the classroom, there he was, leaning against the entrance like he owned the place. James looked sharp, dressed in a black t-shirt, blue jeans, and those damn canvas shoes with laces tied in some mystical way I could never replicate. I couldn't help but eye him up and down, but I kept my mouth shut. James, ever the impatient one, finally spoke up with a smirk. Seen enough? Admission's free, you know. I pursed my lips, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a response. He flicked my head playfully. Come on, say something. I shook my head. Didn't see enough. Oh. James leaned against the wall, the setting sun casting a golden glow around him. Then keep looking. No charge for checking out your own girlfriend. I swear, I turned as red as the sunset itself. James nudged me with his foot. Why so quiet? How could he be so chill about all this? Was he thick-skinned or just battle-hardened from 100 conflicts? I couldn't bear to meet his gaze. I don't know what to say. He took a step closer, our shoes almost touching. You may not know what to say, but you sure knew what to do when you kissed me. His proximity was overwhelming. All I had to do was look up, and I could kiss him. James didn't make another move, his voice hovering just above my head. Weren't you quite skillful when you kissed me? His presence was so close, I could almost feel the rise and fall of his chest, catching the faint scent of soapberry clinging to his skin. But as intense as his proximity was, it was his words that truly shook me. I'd known this moment would come. After I kissed him, I'd rehearsed a million responses in my head, but when it came down to it, I was speechless. What did I say? I confessed. You're just so captivating. I couldn't resist. Would he see me as a rogue? Despite my composed exterior, I knew there was a wild side lurking within me, occasionally pushing me into uncharted territory, like leaning towards James. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and braced myself for what came next. Before I could finish, his handsome face closed in, and the warmth of his lips brushed against mine. I knew instantly. They were James' lips. Even though it was just a brief touch, his lips were soft and comforting, just like last time. But it wasn't the kiss itself that shocked me. It was the audacity of it all, especially within the confines of the school. Realizing this, I instinctively pulled away, but James didn't resist. Instead, he leaned in again, pressing a warm kiss against the bridge of my nose. I couldn't afford to let tears fall. If a teacher caught wind of this, could I claim he'd forced me? Then I remembered, I'd only briefly mentioned his pestering to our homeroom teacher before, and he'd faced severe consequences. After some agonizing deliberation, I decided that if I got caught, I'd have to lie and say I'd coerced him into it. Later on, James found out about my plan and called me a fool. But here's the thing. James is charming, and he always knows the right thing to say. Our summer vacation kicked off with James in the second week. While I spent my time at school attending math and English enrichment classes, James worked tirelessly at part-time jobs outside the home. No one aside from his grandmother knew about us being together. James was raised by his grandmother, who suffered from a weak heart. His dream was to save up enough money for her heart transplant, but her wish was for him to excel in school. James tried, he really did, but he struggled to keep up. Yet, he's the one who told me that a person's potential is solely determined by themselves. I believe in James. I believe he can carve out the life he wants for himself. Senior year breezed by, and James and I kept our relationship discreet, so much so that my parents didn't even know about him until the end of my senior year. Rather than hindering my studies, falling in love became my driving force. I worked harder than ever because I aimed for better schools and more scholarships. I wanted to ease James' burden. I didn't want him to have to work so tirelessly. From hauling bricks at construction sites in the summer to handing out flyers on wintry streets, James juggled different part-time jobs year-round. My heart ached for him. James did decently on his college entrance exams. While he couldn't attend a top-tier school, he could enroll in a local public college, a much better option financially and otherwise than private or specialized institutions. James chose to heed his teacher's advice and pursued a major in economics and finance. Meanwhile, I made a bold decision for the first time in my life. I defied my parents' wishes and opted to attend NYU to study journalism. Thus began our journey of a long-distance relationship. Despite mentally preparing myself for the inevitable distance, tears still streamed down my face as I watched James disappear into the station. I'd already shed tears earlier that morning when I bid my parents farewell, leaving my eyes swollen and red. Yet, James couldn't bear to leave me alone. He stayed by my side for 2 more days, quickly becoming acquainted with the layout of my school. I even found myself dialing his number when I got lost in the labyrinth of classrooms. The first year of our long-distance relationship flew by, and as spring approached, I mustered the courage to confess to my parents about my relationship with James, albeit hiding its inception. However, my attempt to conceal the truth proved futile. My parents deduced that James and I were more than just friends upon learning that we attended the same high school but not the same college. Lying was never my forte, so I defaulted to honesty. My parents erupted in fury, but this time, I didn't remain silent. I presented them with my impressive array of academic achievements and transcripts, attributing part of my success to James. I didn't let a relationship hold me back, and James is partly responsible for how good I look in your eyes now, I reiterated. Gradually, my parents calmed down. Perhaps it was the undeniable evidence of my academic prowess, or perhaps they realized that I was no longer the fragile flower they'd sheltered in the greenhouse. I had proven my ability to thrive independently. Their sudden silence, however, filled me with a pang of sadness. The price of our own growth is often the aging of our parents. Reflecting on their teachings, I questioned whether I had ever rebelled against their well-intentioned guidance. The truth was, I'd often accepted it meekly, giving them the illusion of doing the right thing. While my parents were starting to come to terms with my relationship, they harbored reservations, especially concerning James. They couldn't accept his family background. Recognizing this as a common response, I refrained from arguing and chose not to hide the truth from James. This time, it's going to take both of us working together to make it through. James didn't spend his year solely in hard work. He began to take on tasks that required more strategic thinking under the guidance of his seniors. His family's small yard remained unchanged, adorned with trumpet flowers in the summer and blanketed with snow in the winter. Sometimes, I'd gaze at the stars in the yard, other times I'd watch the moon from the second-floor bedroom to the south. But more often than not, I found myself engaging in adult activities with James. Grandma's health took a turn for the worse, and sadly, she passed away in the winter of our junior year, just before James could save up enough money. Adding to his grief, James' father also passed away not long after. Losing his 2 closest relatives within 6 months took a toll on James. After dealing with his father's funeral, he withdrew into his room, refusing to come out. I stayed by his side throughout, forgoing food and drink when he did, and sitting outside his door when he couldn't sleep. 2 days later, James emerged from his room, now sporting a beard. Exhausted from my vigil, I collapsed onto his bedside. As I took his hand, he leaned in and kissed me tenderly. Despite the less-than-ideal surroundings, I didn't resist. He kissed me and then nestled into the crook of my neck, tears streaming down his face. We cried together, our tears mingling as we held each other close. Amidst our tears, I murmured, "Baby." "I don't have a dad anymore," he choked out, his tears staining my neck. "I don't have a home anymore." I held him tighter, reassuring him, "You still have me. I'll be your dad from now on." He sniffled, "No, my dad is your dad." I managed a smile through my tears, wiping his cheeks. "Daddy." He sat up, enveloping me in his arms, our eyes meeting. In his gaze, I saw a reflection of myself. It made me feel like I was the center of his universe. And perhaps, after all these years, I truly was the only thing he could see in his eyes. I recall a moment during my sophomore year in college when a girl from James' major pursued him relentlessly. No matter how he tried to turn her down, she persisted. Eventually, she invited him to Shanghai for a getaway. Instead of accepting, James brought her straight to my school and introduced her to me as his girlfriend, firmly stating, "This is my girlfriend. If you need to go anywhere, we can take you there." The girl returned to campus and spread rumors about James, causing quite a stir. However, the truth quickly came to light, and she was shunned by James and his friends for spreading lies. Eventually, she publicly apologized to both James and me on the campus website. From that moment on, nobody dared to pursue James on campus. Now, sitting face to face with James, he tells me, "Wait for me for 2 more years, and I will marry you." When others ask me to wait, I might have refused. But when James asks, I find myself unable to decline. He's like a deity to me, and I willingly submit to him. His promise of waiting gives me something to hold on to. We entered college in 2003, just as the domestic real estate industry was beginning to gain traction. By the time we were nearing graduation, housing prices in major cities were skyrocketing. James and some of his seniors had been considering opportunities in the industry for some time. Upon graduation, James headed to Shanghai, partly because I'm pursuing my graduate studies here, and partly because of the abundant opportunities the city offers. James and a few seniors from school had amassed a wealth of contacts. They ventured into Shanghai with humble beginnings, but by 2007, as housing prices soared to their first peak, they also reached the pinnacle of their careers. In 2007, the real estate industry was at an unprecedented high, with residential housing accounting for over 70% of real estate investment. With the market expanding and more players entering the fray, competition for resources intensified. As government attention shifted towards housing security, James and his associates pivoted from commercial residential investments to affordable and low-cost housing projects. This strategic decision proved crucial in weathering the storm of the 2008 financial crisis. Their company emerged as one of the few survivors amidst the tumultuous wave of uncertainty. With his business flourishing, James had long since accumulated enough funds to finance his grandmother's surgery. On the day their company went public, he spent a day sitting by her grave, honoring her memory. Upon his return, James began preparations to propose to me. James wasn't one to keep his intentions hidden, and I could sense his plans the moment he started subtly gauging the size of my ring fingers. The day of the proposal finally arrived, though it seemed long overdue. Yet, I still anticipated it eagerly, uncertain of the exact moment he would pop the question. Each day leading up to the proposal filled me with nervous excitement. I dedicated extra care to my skincare and makeup routine, unwilling to appear anything less than radiant for such a momentous occasion. But fate has a way of teasing us. September 1st, 2009, appeared as an ordinary day. If there was anything remarkable about it, it marked the beginning of our 9-year journey through compulsory education together. It was an ordinary day, and after 3 months of meticulously applying makeup, I had grown lazy. By 5 p.m., I was at home attending to work when James unexpectedly called, asking me to deliver a document to him. Typically, his assistant handled such matters, but in my confusion, I didn't think much of it. Following his instructions, I arrived at what he described as Building 9, Room 901. It was evidently a newly renovated room, and I couldn't fathom why James would hold a meeting in such a place. Pushing open the door, I was greeted by a romantic scene, complete with heart-shaped decorations and rose petals scattered across the floor. In the center stood a photo of James and me, framed by wide floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of his burgeoning business empire. James, dressed formally, approached me with a rose in hand and knelt down. There were no flowery speeches. His intentions were clear. Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened in silence. I didn't fulfill the 2-year promise I made to you back then, but marrying you has always been a goal in my life. As he handed me the roses, I noticed a key nestled within them. Confused, I asked why. "You said you wanted to start a family with me," James replied, producing a heart-shaped ring box. Inside wasn't the diamond ring I had envisioned, but a key. "Why the key?" I inquired. "You'll see," he said, pulling out a diamond ring and proposing again, this time with the ring in hand. Overwhelmed with emotion, I accepted, but to my surprise, Two men emerged from a nearby bedroom. They were my parents. I cried tears of joy as I embraced them, realizing James had gone to great lengths to win their approval. Our wedding date was set for the end of the year, and as we took photos in Holland, James revealed the significance of the proposal date. It coincided with the day we first met. Under the vast sky, I ran through the grass, calling out to James. He responded, and in that moment, I knew our future together would be bright. Our wedding was a grand affair, and we enjoyed a blissful honeymoon in Holland. Upon our return, James threw himself into work, and I supported him every step of the way. Year after year, we lived a simple yet fulfilling life together, cherishing each moment and building a future filled with love and happiness.